It's Tuesday afternoon. Marcus is at the airport, boarding pass in hand. His flight is scheduled to leave in 2 hours. He finds his seat, settles in, and waits. Then an announcement: mechanical inspection needed. No problem. 30 minutes, the pilot says. An hour passes. Then 2. By now, Marcus should have been in the air. Instead, he's still sitting in the cabin, watching the tarmac outside his window. The airline hasn't told him much. It's routine, the crew says. These things happen. By the time the flight finally pushes back, 5 hours have passed. But Marcus has no idea he's already legally entitled to hundreds of dollars. And he's never going to claim it. Delays happen to millions of airline passengers every year. Most of them, like Marcus, have no idea what the law actually says they deserve. What happened to Marcus wasn't unusual. It was the norm. The flight eventually landed 5 hours late. Marcus missed his business meeting, rebooked his hotel, and moved on. But here's what he didn't know. The moment that plane pushed back more than 2 hours late, Marcus legally became entitled to compensation. Not from the airline being nice. From federal law. The Department of Transportation has rules, clear, written rules, that say airlines must pay passengers when delays hit a certain threshold. For a flight delayed more than 2 hours on arrival, it's up to $1,550. For international flights in Europe, it's even stricter, up to €600. This isn't a suggestion. It's a mandate. And yet, 6 months later, Marcus found out about this law by accident while reading an article on the internet. He had missed every deadline to claim it. He wasn't alone. Billions of dollars in compensation, legally owed, federally mandated, goes unclaimed every single year. The question is why. Let's break down what the law actually says. The Department of Transportation regulates how airlines operate in the United States. One of those regulations covers what happens when flights don't arrive on time. It's called the Fly Rights Rule, and it's surprisingly specific. If your flight is delayed more than 3 hours on arrival, and the airline caused it, you're entitled to compensation. The amount depends on 2 things: the length of your flight and how late you arrive. For domestic flights delayed 1 to 2 hours, airlines must pay up to 100% of your ticket price, capped at $775. For delays of 2 hours or more, it's double, up to $1,550. International flights have different rules. And then there's overbooking. When an airline sells more seats than it has on a flight, it must first ask for volunteers to give up their seats. If there are volunteers, they get compensation plus rebooking. But if there aren't enough volunteers, the airline must involuntarily bump paying passengers. Those passengers are entitled to compensation ranging from $775 to $1,550, depending on the circumstances. Europe has gone further. Under a regulation called EC 261/2004, passengers on any flight departing from an EU airport are entitled to compensation for delays of 3 hours or more. The amount? Between €250 and €600, depending on the flight distance. And here's the key difference. European law applies to all airlines flying out of Europe, regardless of where the flight is going. The United States does not have this broad protection. But both systems have the same problem. Most passengers don't know these laws exist. Here's the tension. The law exists. It's published. It's mandatory. But airlines are not required to tell you about it when you're entitled to claim it. Think about that. When your flight is delayed or overbooked, the airline has no legal obligation to notify you that you have a right to compensation. They have to post the rules somewhere, usually in tiny text on their website or in their terms and conditions. But they are not required to say, your flight was delayed 2 hours. You are now entitled to $400 to $600. They can sit quietly and hope you never find out. And most people don't. After the United Airlines incident in 2017, when passenger David Dow was forcibly removed from an overbooked flight in an incident that went viral, the DOT tightened overbooking rules and raised compensation limits. But they still didn't require airlines to notify passengers automatically. The law stayed the same. Your rights exist, but the airline doesn't have to tell you. So what happens? Passengers like Marcus live their lives, completely unaware that they have money waiting. The airlines save billions. And a whole industry of third-party claim services has emerged. Companies that will claim compensation on your behalf in exchange for taking 25 to 50% of what they recover. Why would anyone use these services? Because it's easier than fighting an airline yourself. The airline makes the process difficult intentionally. They don't have a button on their website that says claim your compensation. You have to write letters, file complaints, navigate terms and conditions. Most people give up. So the central question becomes this. If the law says airlines owe you money, why are they allowed to hide it? Why can't they be forced to tell you when you're eligible? And more broadly, what does it mean for consumer protection if a legal right exists, but most people never claim it? These aren't small questions. They go to the heart of how regulatory systems actually work in practice versus on paper. This isn't new. The Montreal Convention, which sets rules for international aviation, was established back in 1999. Before that, the Warsaw Convention in 1925 first created the idea that airlines have legal liability to passengers. For a century, the principle has been clear: passengers have rights. But enforcement has always lagged behind the law. Europe figured this out earlier. When EC 261/2004 was implemented in 2005, it created not just compensation rights, but enforcement mechanisms. Passengers could file complaints with national aviation authorities. The EU gave regulators teeth. The United States hasn't done that. The DOT can fine airlines for violations, but the responsibility to claim compensation falls on passengers. It's the opposite system, and it shows. In Europe, passengers are far more likely to actually claim compensation because the system is designed to make it easier. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this gap became impossible to ignore. Airlines canceled thousands of flights and tried to issue travel credits instead of refunds. Legally, passengers were entitled to refunds. Regulators said so, but most passengers accepted credits because the airline made it the path of least resistance. Over time, the DOT did crack down, issuing fines to major carriers for refund violations. But by then, billions had already been paid out in worthless credits. The bigger picture is this. Regulatory systems work best when they're automatic. When someone has to actively claim a right, most don't. This happens in banking, insurance, telecommunications, and now aviation. The question for regulators is whether the system should be flipped. Should companies have to proactively offer compensation rather than require customers to demand it? So what happens now? There's growing pressure on the DOT to require airlines to automatically notify passengers and offer compensation. The Federal Trade Commission has also started looking at airline practices more closely. Europe continues to tighten enforcement. Internationally, more countries are adopting EU-style passenger protection rules. And third-party claim services continue to grow, capturing more of the compensation that should go directly to passengers. The most likely scenario? A patchwork. Some airlines may voluntarily start notifying passengers to improve customer goodwill. The DOT may require automatic notification through regulation. But this will take time. In the meantime, if you've experienced a flight delay of 3 or more hours or have been involuntarily bumped from an overbooked flight, you likely have a claim. If this sounds like your experience, talk to a licensed attorney who specializes in consumer or aviation law about whether your specific situation qualifies for compensation. You may have money waiting. The law already says you do. The system just isn't designed to remind you. Knowledge is your first line of defense. This is educational content, not legal advice.